Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's me, the Frugal. So today I want to talk about why you really need an emergency fund. So let's dive in. Being an adult means accepting that life is a balance between chaos and calm. And with that knowledge comes the acceptance that things will go wrong in life. And as we are unable to foresee the future, all we can do is put in place insurance to mitigate against that fact. And this is where the emergency fund comes in. I've read somewhere recently that an emergency fund means the difference between having a small bump in your financial life and having a complete disaster in your entire life. And for me, it was completely spot on. In reality, an emergency fund is the difference between taking on unsustainable debt or cutting corners when you are in solution mode, when you're trying to solve the problem that has arisen, and having the money to solve the problem that has arisen and prevent negative ripples or far-reaching implications. And what do I mean by negative ripples and far-reaching implications? Well, let's think about this in the context of the pandemic that we're living through today. Finder.com has reported that as of 2020, 41% of Brits do not have enough savings to live on for a month without income. This is a real problem because, as we know, the unemployment rate is increasing and is set to get worse once the furlough scheme ends. We also know that a third of people still in employment have seen their income drop, so employment is no longer a security bubble for many of us today. If we put this picture together and add it to the fact that a third of Brits have less than £600 in savings and 1 in 10 have no savings at all, we have a recipe for disaster, individually and nationally. And before the pandemic was even a thing, 26 million of us in the UK were using our overdraft to manage our spending every year. And of this 26 million, 8.9 of us in Britain were being charged overdraft fees that we didn't understand or weren't even aware of. And for those people that were using their overdraft to manage emergencies, they were immediately making the situation worse for them in the long term because the interest compounding that they were completely blind to. And look, this is not just a UK problem. Prosperity Now, an anti-poverty organisation in the US, found in 2019 that 2/3 of US households were liquid asset poor, i.e. they lacked the savings to be able to weather financial shocks. Again, having no emergency fund buffer. And it's the same with credit cards. It's easy to think that because you have a credit card with a substantial credit limit that you are prepared for the unexpected. But really, all you're doing is using your credit card to delay paying for the problem. You will eventually have to pay for it one way or the other, whether you're adding interest to it or not. And for many, the debt option, whether credit card, overdraft, or hideously payday lenders, is the fork in the road that starts or compounds the slippery slope to the never-ending debt spiral. Having a liquid pot of money set aside is really the only way to protect yourself from the consequences of financial blows. In my recent net worth video, I talked about the importance of being an asset builder. But what I should have said is that being asset rich but cash poor is a recipe for disaster because emergencies need to be dealt with immediately. And so if you are relying on your assets that are bundled up in tangible things like your property or investments, selling any of these off or borrowing against them is you effectively stealing from your future to deal with the issues of today. Instead, having an emergency fund of £1,000 or $1,000, and I don't agree with that £1,000 or dollars. I know Dave Ramsey and a lot of people talk about that. I personally don't think it's enough. Rather, I would recommend sensibly having an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months at a minimum of cash that you can leave aside and call on at your hour of need. Instead, it will give you the peace of mind that you can deal with anything that comes up. Having your break glass fund will give you the confidence that no matter what comes up, you will be able to weather that storm, whether that be job loss or just having a really expensive car breakdown. An emergency fund will be important to different people for different reasons. For instance, if you are on a debt-free journey, I do highly recommend that you do have an emergency fund, even though it may feel like a waste to have money sitting there that you could use to pay off your debt. But think about it, if you have an emergency and you don't have a cash buffer to call on, you will be making your debt situation worse. You may be adding months or years of interest to the situation that you're trying to get out of. Whereas if you focus on actually just saving a pot of money to give you a bit of a buffer and then start your debt journey, get your debt repayment journey again, you will actually be protecting the hard work that you're putting into changing your situation. Equally, if you don't have a budget or you're new to budgeting, having an emergency fund will help you manage those unexpected expenses that you have forgotten to factor into your monthly or quarterly budget. Once you have more of a handle on your expenses, you can then move to setting up sinking funds to actually deal with those more infrequent expenses that may happen once a year, every 6 months or so, and then leave your emergency fund for just that, emergencies. And then from my own experience, if you own a home, you definitely need an emergency fund. I cannot state this enough. You need it, because your pipes will burst 3 weeks after you get the keys to your home, ruining your floors. Your boiler will absolutely stop working on the first day of winter, the coldest day of the year. Or you're going to have an insidious leak in your floor that you didn't even notice for months until your neighbours start telling you that their ceiling below you is bubbling over, and you have to fix the actual pipe in the floor and then have their ceiling painted. Anyway, once I'm over my trauma, home ownership is great, but it is expensive. And then for the final group, if you have a savings goal to buy the house that I might be freaking you out about, but you should definitely buy, or that you're hoping to take a sabbatical, invest in a business, whatever it may be, having an emergency fund will help protect your savings pot and your dreams. The key to remember here, and the thing I think that is a little bit difficult for people, is that your emergency fund is not money that you will use to achieve those dreams. Instead, it is your insurance policy to protect against destroying them. Hopefully, you'll never have to use your emergency fund, but the way life is, you'll need it sooner or later. So if you do have dreams, it makes sense to have a separated pot of money that you can call on to deal with the problems that arise in life, and leave your dream pot, your goal pot, your life pot separate and protected, so that you can achieve what you want to achieve in the time scale that you have set out for yourself, and not have a setback because you didn't have anything over here to deal with it. To be honest, there is no group of people that does not need an emergency fund for all manner of reasons. It is key. Okay, so if you don't have an emergency fund, these are the things that you need to do to get yourself started. First, we start with calculating our expenses, and we're going bare bones here. We're looking at our bills, our accommodation, so our rent or our mortgage. We're looking at car payments and the grocery budget. Here, you are trying to calculate the amount of money that you need to spend to keep yourself alive. Not alive in luxury, just alive, i.e. you lost your job and this is the bare minimum, the absolute minimum that you can live on and keep yourself and maybe your family going without any luxuries in life, without any frivolous spending, without any socializing, takeaways, etc. Once you have that figure, your monthly spend, multiply it by either 3 or 6, so 3 or 6 months, depending on what you deem is appropriate. How much of a buffer do you actually want to save? What do you think is realistic for you? And once you have that multiple, you have your saving target. You'll know how big your emergency pot needs to be. Okay, so we set that aside for a moment and we go and open up an easy access savings account. This is something that is completely separate from your savings accounts today, whether you have multiple sinking funds or not. We now need a separate emergency fund, because you need to know how much you actually have for emergencies versus the other things that you're saving for. And please do note that the account must be easily accessible. We're not fixing money away for a year to get a higher interest rate. We're not investing the money because of the risk of loss over the short term. We are going to be putting the money into a very low interest yielding account. And I know that hurts. I know that inflation will be eating away the value of the money because the money is not really doing anything. But the premise of an emergency fund is that it's readily available if something occurs today. You need to be able to access it immediately or in a few hours. And because of that, we do sacrifice making money from this pot. Okay, so now you have your savings goal and you have your savings account. The next thing for you to do is to work out how much you can afford to contribute to that account every single month. Now, for some of you, you may decide to save for your emergency fund exclusively and only stop once you have that 5,000, 10,000, 4,000 pounds, whatever it is that your emergency pot needs to be. Others of you may take my route and actually make it part of your savings plan. So you put some money away in your emergency pot. You then also put money into your sinking funds. You invest, but whichever route you choose to take, because it's an emergency fund, you need to make sure that you have that cash buffer available as soon as possible. This is not something that you kind of want to drip feed £10 into every month or every few months. You want to be focused on getting that emergency pot in place as soon as possible, so that in the eventuality of something going wrong, you have something to actually dip into. I just want to end by saying that cash truly is king when it comes to our financial lives. Although I prioritize investing and I only save for specific things that I'm trying to do, projects, rather than having pots of cash sitting around, because actually I don't think that's an effective way of using my money. My emergency fund is my safety blanket. It's the reason why I can actually sleep well at night, knowing that if anything crops up, anything unexpected, I don't have to touch my investments. I don't have to dip into my MBA tuition fund. I don't have to rack up debt on my credit card that I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to pay off in the next few months because I hadn't planned for it. So where am I going to get the money to pay for it if I can't pay for it with cash today? I just wanted to get that across to you all, because your emergency fund will give you the protection that you require so that you can build your life of financial stability and then one day hopefully freedom. And it does genuinely all start with that emergency fund. So if you're thinking about starting one, or if you have a small pot of cash, say you have £5,000 today, take that 5,000 and say, you know what, this is my emergency fund. This is my emergency fund, and start a new saving journey. If you know that your emergency fund isn't quite big enough, bump it up. But actually take that money, put it away, and just say, you know what, that's untouchable money. It doesn't actually exist, and I'm gonna start from scratch. That's how important this is. Okay guys, so that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you thought it was valuable, please do give me a thumbs up. It helps the algorithm. If you'd like to see more videos like this, subscribe, stick around, watch some more of my other videos. Let me know what you think in the comments below as well. I love to hear from you all. I love to hear your insights and learn from you all and get new perspectives. Okay, with that, I've talked a lot today. Until next time, thanks. Bye.